All right. All right, let's begin. All right. Hi, everyone. This is team for level 4 students. We're doing differentiating strategies. My name is Aram. I'm also working with Melissa, Anna, and Jessica. So here's some descriptors of level 4 students. In terms of listening, these students are able to understand social and academic discourse with varying levels of complexity. They are able to comprehend varying use of social, general, academic, content-specific vocabulary as well. And these are in concrete and abstract ways as well. In terms of speaking, they can generate grammatically varied speech in social and academic settings. They also use academic language when talking about concrete and abstract concepts. As for reading, they are able to comprehend increasingly complex text, as long as they have some understanding prior to understanding that, or if there is some support. Unknown topics do require that support. When it comes to writing, they are able to produce social and academic texts about concrete topics as well as abstract concepts. They use more precise general academic / context-specific vocabulary, and their errors don't really come in their way of their meanings. So overall, in summary, these students are well on their way to being proficient with their English. They just need a little bit more support here or there.
All right, so some potential obstacles that assignments and assessments may pose for level 4 students. So standardized and classroom tests, they pose potential barriers for ELLs to comprehend grade level questions, especially if they're not modified or if they don't have any underlying supports. Tests that are commonly designed for native English speakers also make it really difficult as a teacher to interpret their scores, to understand if they're lacking in proficiency in language, or in the content knowledge, or possibly in both. And standardized tests and classroom tests that measure language proficiency, it limits ELL's opportunities for more advanced educational programs, such as maybe like an AP course, or some of the gifted programs. Next slide. So to combat some of these obstacles, so here are some following strategies for assignments and assessments. To support level 4 students in completing these grade level assignments, they should be met with scaffolding, such as explanations about how to complete the task beforehand. Teachers can also extend the time for students to complete an assignment or the assessment, maybe in a different classroom or met with a different teacher. During assignments or assessments beforehand, they could receive some peer or teacher tutoring, and level 4 students could also use a bilingual dictionary to support them while doing it. Teachers should also use accessible scoring rubrics, so explanations are clear beforehand for ELLs and that they are sensitive to their proficiency level. It's also important to explain directions both orally and visually so that they have multiple modes to receive the information. And lastly, requiring students to use pre-taught language and respond with increasingly complex vocabulary will help them as they're building towards language proficiency. Next slide, please. And just a few more strategies. It's important to explicitly teach some of the more advanced academic language, and this supports not only ELLs, but also native speakers as well. As for grade level texts, these should be met with scaffolding to support students in reading them. And also they should be given some lower reading level materials, but as well with visual support. When it comes to tests, it's important to pre-teach some of that traditional test language. Like in a multiple choice test, they might include a question that says all of the following except, or all of these to choose multiple answers. So just to teach that test language beforehand so students know what they're going to be facing. Also to ensure that the goal of the assessment is clear. So it's important as teachers that we know beforehand, what is it that we're trying to assess? Are we assessing content knowledge? Are we assessing students' writing ability? Or are we assessing their ability to do both? And then as always, it's important to always routinely examine tests and assignments beforehand for any language that may require that explicit instruction or that pre-teaching so that we can best support students to reach language proficiency. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to be talking about the instructional strategies by modality, which there are 4 different modalities that could be listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Next slide, please. For listening, a couple quotes directly from the textbook. It says, scaffold language development by modeling and prompting increasingly academic and grammatically varied language about both concrete and abstract topics, and promote higher order thinking processes during oral teaching by providing students with graphic organizers. These graphic organizers are meant to help students interpret what information they deem important to better understand the topic at hand. It is also important to note that at this stage of level 4, we do want the students to be able to attempt the graphic organizer on their own so we can see what they do and do not understand and address any potential misconceptions, because the point of this is to have them reach proficiency by being able to think and speak abstractly. Next slide, please. For speaking, we want to provide opportunities to produce extended oral discourse, increasingly inclusive of abstract thought. Discourse can be the students engaging in a debate in a history classroom. This could be, or like everyday law, criminal justice for or against the death penalty, for instance. Having the students have to think and pick a side, and also having them partake in group presentations. It's also very important that ELs have a chance to have a practice run with their peers so they have the opportunity to think about what they're going to say, practice the speaking, and address any mispronunciation of a word or potential misuse of a word. Furthermore, we want to scaffold oral language with visual aids and model academic discourse. So this can also be done with sentence frames and starters. And we also want to be persistent on correct/exact academic language. We don't want to necessarily nitpick with the student. However, we do want to help guide them further. So if they mispronounce a word, helping them sound it out, or if they misuse a word, ask them what they were trying to say and help direct them and guide them to the appropriate word that they should be using. And we can do this by providing alternative structures, providing vocab and models moving closer towards that proficiency. Next slide, please. For reading, it's important that we use a combination of grade level text that is high quality, age appropriate, as well as lower reading level books aligned with the current content curriculum, including some visual support. Again, we want to make sure that it's noted that the lower reading books that are provided are seen as supplemental. That's just to be extra help for them. We still want them to be getting, if they're in the 8th grade, working with 8th grade reading levels, or else then we're just going to help them stay stagnant at level 4. And other examples we can have is by pre-teaching the vocab or giving them the vocabulary that we're going to be talking about in the next topic beforehand so they can look it over, giving the students the outlines or providing extra one-on-one teacher explanations when needed. And again, graphic organizers are really big for EL students. We want to also have them create their own with their reading to, again, push that higher level thinking. Next slide. The last modality is writing, and this here we want to provide students opportunities for written discourse, so it's similar with speaking, except now as opposed to a debate or a group presentation, they're going to be writing an essay. It could be an essay where students have to assess problems and pose potential solutions. It could be about global warming. It could be about how we could combat pollution in certain cities, or it could be persuasive essays, why someone might be for or against becoming vegan or vegetarian, for instance. We also want to continue to scaffold the written language production with visual aids and sentence starters. When permitted, this could vary individually for each EL student you have. And we want to further push the students to achieve the precise academic language and or grammar to prevent them from staying at level 4. So that means if they're misusing the wrong there in the essay, circle it, and then not only writing the correct one, but explain. THEIR is when someone is possessing something, it's their item, not just writing down the word because maybe they need further help understanding the concept at hand. Or it could be in an academic sense based on the subject. If you're in a science lab, if a student writes jar, instead explain to them that though this could be interpreted as a jar based on the content with their funds of knowledge, we want them to be used to interpreting this jar as a beaker and have them write beaker. And that concludes the modalities, and we could do the next slide and pass it over to Melissa.
Hi. The instructional examples require students to use academic language during this course, provide scaffolding and support for students to be able to engage in grade level work, provide graphic organizers, and sentence starters and sentence frames. Next. So an example of a graphic organizer that we used is provided. So they were lectured and showed some videos, and they had to organize their ideas of the similarities and differences of different type of fuels. A list of the properties that they should be including was given. Flashcards were also given for each type of fuel with the properties and how the chemical reaction would read. Another strategy is modeling. That this one can be used for any lab. Instead of just handing instructions or just talking about it, the teacher can model what is expected from the student to do. Next. For speaking and writing, in a performance task, we ask our students why a reaction wouldn't proceed, and we were assessing for use of evidence and reasoning. So the sentence frame provided was one reason for the rocket will not blast off will be, and they could say, oh, because they didn't have enough activation energy for it to proceed. Or this is similar to what we learned in class when we were watching the videos of the different types of fuels that some burn better than others. Next. We also had an activity word sort that they were given a bunch of cards for the different types of chemical reactions, synthesis, combustion, decomposition, single and double replacement. So for example, for synthesis, it will give you the syntax of how the reaction should be A plus B equals AB. And it will, another card will explain in words that there was only one product in that reaction. And another card will give you a visual that would draw from that draws from the funds of knowledge of the students of this TV show. And also, if you don't know the TV show, you know what a cat and a dog looks like. So you can visualize a combination of the two so that it's easier for you to understand what a synthesis looks like. And so they had to arrange all this bunch of cards for each type of chemical reaction. You can also give a specific vocabulary that will serve students for a lower English level proficiency, but also supports, still applies for level 4 students. Another that we have for our performance task, they were asked to draw a model and to give an explanation. And instead of telling them, oh, use these specific words, we will just give the criteria of discussing reactants of products, explain how the reaction starts, and discuss energy of the reaction. Next. Next. And for reading, they were given this reading that was grade level. And they were supposed to circle with different colors. They were supposed to circle what type of change it was, physical or chemical, underline the properties of this type of change, and box the examples that were given in the reading. And also visual supports were given for abstract ideas like the formation of water from hydrogen and oxygen. So a figure is shown there, and the student can visualize how the bonds are breaking, new bonds are being formed. Also, simpler visuals are an ice cube melting for physical change and cooking for chemical change. And next.
All right, thank you, Melissa. And for our discussion questions, our first question is, how can you as an educator identify level 4 students and support them on their path to reaching level 5 of mastery and progress along the ELD continuum? And our second question is, what are some additional strategies / challenges you can think of for supporting level 4 students? Right, so the textbook mentions that at level 4, students they appear to be more fluent with their English, but they still need that support. So our first question is, how could you identify students in this situation and support them? As well as question 2 is like, well, if we are going to support them, they still need some type of support, little or more, not as big as previous levels, but they still need some support. So like, what kind of things can you think of, or what would be a challenge of implementing these smaller supports for the students? But that is the end of our presentation. Thank you all for watching, and that's all we have for you.